This is part 2 of our conversation with Jonathan Jarecki. If you missed part 1, check out the link in the description below. Otherwise, grab your notebooks and enjoy the conversation.
Finishing up on the Glenn Jeffrey study here, a big takeaway from this is this one's a 40 watt, but 40, 60 watt incandescent light bulb. Get a little lamp fixture, put it on your desk.
Mhm.
Like, simple as that. You're going to have huge benefits. Simple.
Yeah.
So like, we don't need all this biohacking stuff. You don't necessarily need.
I agree.
Yeah. Or just go outside.
Yeah.
But
well, and that's the thing too, is it's like, it's like, it's all about getting back into balance.
Yeah. And
the best way to do that is to get more connected to the earth.
Yeah.
More connected to the environment around you, and that this is really my approach actually to architecture. I see architecture as 3 different puzzle pieces. It's like a puzzle that we're putting together. The first puzzle piece is you as like the human being, right? Like the person who is doing the architecture. You have all your unique behaviors, habits, goals, aspirations, aesthetic. You're also, you also are a human being. You're not a rabbit, right? So like you're not a reptile. So like there's different biological, definitions or boundaries. And so that creates one puzzle piece with all of its boundaries, right? Like a unique shape that is you. And then you have the land, and different landscapes have different definitions, right? Like different boundaries, whether it's northern hemisphere versus southern hemisphere, in that the sun is it towards the north, or the sun is toward angling toward the south, or whether it's a colder climate, or whether the predominant wind direction in the summer versus the winter is coming from X, Y, or Z direction. Whether you have certain topography or terrain, soil, trees, views, water. Like there's so many different elements that come together. The wildlife, the sounds, the smells. All these elements come together to create a unique definition, or the boundary. I'm referring to those interchangeably. The unique definition that is this puzzle piece, right? Now, if you take both of those puzzle pieces and you don't have the third, and you try to put them together, oftentimes they actually don't fit. I know we're talking here a lot about like, oh, we just need to get back to nature, right? But the reality is that you cannot just take a naked human being, throw them into the environment, and expect those puzzle pieces to lock up perfectly. Yeah. And we know this to be true because we have plenty of reality TV shows, where we do exactly that for the effect of the drama and the fact of it. And the question in everyone's mind is like, how long will they survive? Right? Not like, oh, you do this and they're immediately in paradise. And what you'll find is that the people who succeed, the first thing they'll do is actually create an architectural interface between them and the landscape. So in other words, they'll build a hut, or they'll build some sort of shelter first, right? Whereas others who don't do a shelter and they try to go straight after like food or other sorts of, needs, it doesn't go so well, because the architectural interface allows them to prolong their interaction with the environment that they're in. Obviously, some environments are more harsh than others, and so you need a little bit more of a robust interface. But nonetheless, the interface, that's what I see. Like, in my opinion, architecture is an interface that we create to allow us to be that, to interact, or to I keep saying the word, but to interface us with the landscape. And so the beautiful thing about the architectural puzzle piece is that it can be whatever we decide for it to be. So I can take that third puzzle piece and I can perfectly match this half of the puzzle piece to plug in to my needs. And then I can perfectly map out this other half of the puzzle piece to plug into the environment that I'm trying to connect to. And when I do that, now I've created an architectural form that is allowing me to bond to the landscape in a way that I otherwise would have never experienced. The reality of our architectural form is that we don't see it as an interface. We actually see it as a barrier between us and the landscape, like something specifically to avoid our exposure to the sun, avoid our exposure to the air, avoid our exposure to the earth, avoid our exposure to whatever it is, right? The insects, everything. Like, we're trying to create a break. And when we do that, that immediately is going to dysregulate so many things. So we have a very bad interface for this third puzzle piece. And so the whole point behind my practice right now is to try to create an architectural form, which is why we're meeting here right now, is to try to understand like what is this puzzle piece, for people, so that way I can create a more specific edge on this side of the architectural form that plugs in a way that now allows us to interface in terms of light, right? Which is a lot. Or when my interview with Gerald Pollack, how do we interface with the environment in terms of water,
Sure.
right? And so on. And there's many layers to this, but that's kind of the way that's like the whole reason why we're here right now.
I love it.
To figure that out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's great. It's what we need, right?
Mm-hmm.
Our built environment is in shambles right now.
Yeah.
So
okay. The
light into the eyes.
That's right. Yes. That's the next part.
Yeah. Before I get there, let me talk. Let me talk about skin. One last thing about skin. Light on skin. It's like we broke down like red and near infrared on mitochondria health, and first off, there's so many studies. Like we could literally be sitting here all day just talking about the studies and like diving into the studies of all these benefits. Like we see reduced ICU length of stay. People who are in the ICU, 30% reduction in length of stay just from near infrared light. Yeah. We see like all these things, right?
Well, there was a study on classrooms where they had more full spectrum lighting in one classroom versus non full spectrum lighting, like the typical fluorescence in another. And they found that the kids, the ADHD was cured.
Oh yeah.
And they also had 1/3 fewer cavities, which is like wild to think that like, how is it that cavities are affected by light? But it turns out you expose your children to more full spectrum lighting, they're gonna have fewer cavities. Yeah. The same goes with growth. They found that the growth pattern this is especially important. I want to get into designing some schools because there's a lot to this, especially when you're a developmental age and kids spend a lot of time in schools. And so like the growth patterns that you have they're affected by light. But anyway, there's a lot of stuff.
Yeah, there's so much stuff.
Sick days in office spaces.
Yeah.
Like literally there was a study done in offices and they found that, people are happier, they're less aggravated, their performance increases, they have fewer sick days just by changing the lights in an office.
Yeah. Are you familiar with John Ott?
Yes.
Okay. So he's done like a lot of time lapse video on he did one on classrooms where he had a time lapse of classroom before with the normal lighting. You see this most of the kids, but there's this one kid in particular who's like always moving around and like can't stay still. And then they make the lights more warm. So and even that changes stuff. And making the lights more warm, not so blue enriched, not so bright white. And you see this kid is like able to sit in his chair and like listen to the teacher, and actually involuntarily went to the front of the classroom to sit down.
Really?
Yeah, crazy. But he has so many. He has a book and all that stuff. But he was an awesome researcher.
You're gonna say one more thing about the skin?
Yeah, about the skin. Well, I'll say 3 more things.
Sure. Yeah, no, we have all day. Come on.
Okay, so really quick thing about this. So we looked at long wavelength infrared light and red light. Short wavelength UV also has a ton of benefits. Most people know vitamin D production. It's actually interesting. I have a post on my Instagram, but if you look at the vitamin D, like plasma concentrations that is like recommended, or sorry, the daily intake of vitamin D, like how much vitamin D we should be getting per day. It's like 400 to 700 IUs, I think, around is what is recommended. There was actually 2 independent group of researchers after I forget the national organization who recommended that, but 2 independent groups of researchers that looked at the data that was they used to give that recommendation of vitamin D intake, and they saw that there was a miscalculation in how much vitamin D that should be recommended. And so the first set of researchers that went to recalculate this showed that you should be getting around, I believe, like 3,000 IUs per day.
Oh, wow.
And then the second group, I think it was 7,000 IUs, and the second group did 8,000 IUs.
Wow.
So
like more than 10x.
Yeah, insane. So as far as I'm aware, now maybe there is, I haven't seen it, but as far as I'm aware, when I was doing this research, there was I saw no one argue against these two new recommendations.
Mhm.
So, and that was in 2011, I believe, 2011, 2012, when they gave that recommendation. There's been no update since. Now, that's to say, when we go out in midday, so in order to make vitamin D, our body needs UVB light. So again, UV can be UVA and UVB. UVB light is what produces vitamin D inside the body. Vitamin D, it's not really like a vitamin, it's really like a hormone. But UVB light is what produces vitamin D in the body. And you can be like outdoors with like a short sleeve t-shirt and like shorts, midday sunlight. If there's UVB present, you can make like 5,000 IUs of vitamin D in like, I don't know, 5-10 minutes. Like,
and it's better for you.
Oh, and it's way,
consumed
yes.
vitamin
Well, this
D.
is the thing. So I have another post on my Instagram, and there's a paper that there's a figure in a paper talking about vitamin D where they show the pathway of UVB light to vitamin D. And it's not a straight line. It's not UVB, vitamin D. It's UVB, another compound. That compound gets split into a bunch of compounds. The other there's almost 50 metabolites of that are involved in the process of producing UVB. Producing vitamin D.
That makes so much sense.
So when we take a vitamin D pill, all we're taking is that active form of vitamin D. When there are literally 50 other metabolites that when our body's exposed to UV light, we're also getting. We're not getting that in a pill. We're getting one of those compounds in a pill.
It's the same concept with LED. Like we're oversimplifying, we're over concentrating.
Exactly.
And this reminds me of something that Andrew Huberman had said, which was, and I'm gonna mess it up a little bit, I think. But he said that you shouldn't take something endogenously that your body, or I'm sorry, you shouldn't take something exogenously that your body produces endogenously. And vitamin D seems like the perfect example of that.
Yeah, it's a perfect example.
And so it's like, anytime I have friends, I'm not a doctor, and I always preface that by telling them, but anytime I have friends who are like, yeah, my doctor said I need to taking all this vitamin D. And I'm like, how much time do you spend outside? It's like, none. Like I go in the office before the sun rises. I'm there until after the sun sets. I'm like, just go outside, please. Please. Because you could get vitamin D toxicity if you're consuming too much.
It's rare, but it's possible. It's possible.
But even still, the vitamin D that you get from the sun happens pretty quick.
Yep.
And it stays in the bloodstream longer, and the metabolites that you're talking about, you're getting all that benefit, and
it's regulated. Our body doesn't overproduce it. So at a certain point, our body will actually start breaking down vitamin D if it produces too much. So I don't want to say impossible, but practically possible. There are some cases of vitamin D toxicity, but it's very rare, especially, and that's mainly if you're supplementing. If you're getting vitamin D from UVB exposure, it's practically impossible to overdose on the amount of vitamin D that your body's producing because it's regulated.
And it makes me think of I was listening to I can't remember his name, but he's like supposedly the leading researcher on vitamin D specifically, and just his presentation blew me away in terms of like just how important vitamin D is for the body as a hormone. And it makes more sense now that you mentioned that it's actually not just about vitamin D. It's actually all these precursors that are all these processes and metabolites that are occurring before the vitamin D process is actually happening.
Exactly.
So it's having a much more profound effect on the body.
Exactly. And this is the concept of like scientific reductionism, right? We, in science, like we reduce things to just take vitamin D and that will replace the sun. No, it's the same thing with like, I believe that there was some studies a while back showing that eating certain, I believe it was like eating like orange foods like carrots, things like that, basically reduces your risk of lung cancer, I think it was. You'll have to check me on this, but it will get the concept across. Reduces the case of lung cancer. So they were like, what compound in that is going to reduce the case of lung cancer? They took whatever the compound was, they did a clinical trial. They had to stop the clinical trial before the clinical trial ended because they actually saw worse outcomes with taking whatever the compound was. I think it was like beta carotene, I guess. Beta carotene is what makes these things orange, like carrots. But I think it was beta carotene. They had to stop the clinical trial because it was giving these people worse outcomes. So that's the whole thing. Like scientific reductionism is probably one of the, and I think more scientists are getting away from this gradually. Like even in like food, nutrition science, like we're always focused on like, all right, like the amino acids and all this. It's like, it's a whole picture. And like, there's now this concept of the food matrix. It's you have an amino acid, you have protein in a food. Well, that protein is also is also structured with other compounds and other minerals and other micronutrients that your body is also utilizing. So scientific reductionism, yes, it's a and the vitamin D, describes this perfectly. But that's to say, I'll also say one thing about vitamin D. During COVID, it was interesting that we saw people who had higher vitamin D levels had better outcomes with COVID. Dr. Roger Schwelt, he's a quadruple board certified physician out of Loma Linda, California.
We should probably listen to what he has to say.
Oh yeah, so he was on Huberman's podcast as well. It was an amazing podcast, like almost 4 hours, I think.
Oh my gosh.
But Roger Schwelt, he's out in Loma Linda, California. He works at a bunch of different hospitals actually, and he's absolutely amazing. He saw this. He saw that his patients with COVID, he's in the intensive care unit, so he's getting like the sickest of the sickest. He saw his patients with COVID who had higher vitamin D levels, and there was extensive literature showing this and correlations that higher vitamin D levels, these people had better outcomes with COVID. So he thought, and other people during this time, doctors during this time thought, all right, let me supplement my patients with vitamin D and see what happens. There was no effect. So what he did was like, maybe vitamin D status in these participants was actually a proxy for sunlight exposure. So maybe these participants who had higher vitamin D had more sun exposure, and it was the sun exposure that was improving their health outcomes, not necessarily the vitamin D itself. Now, vitamin D also has a ton of benefits, and like don't want to discount that, but this is what we saw, right? So what Roger Schwelt was actually doing was he tells the story best. I'm just recounting from what I remember, but it was something along the lines of, he went to this patient who was basically on the verge of like death, right? He had COVID, severe COVID, was on almost 100% oxygen, like super high amounts of oxygen that they were having to give to him to keep this guy alive. And it was like his last wish basically was like, I just want to like go see nature and like go outside. And Roger Schwelt, he describes like, if you're a doctor in the scenario and like your patient's like about to die and he has one last wish, you're going to try to do everything you can to make that wish happen, So they figured it out. They got the oxygen tank strapped to like this chair that he was on. They rolled him out outside and just like had him sit out there in the sun, like not expecting anything to happen, right? Had him sit out in the sun for, I don't know, maybe like 15 minutes, I think is what I recall. His oxygen, he didn't need as much oxygen. So he went down to maybe 85% oxygen. They were like, Took him outside next day. Went down to like 60% oxygen. Next day. He kept taking them outside for, I don't know how many days. Roger Schwelt, tells this. But by the time a handful of days passed, completely off oxygen, dispatched from the hospital. So Roger saw this, right? And he saw this and he was like what? Just like we didn't expect this to happen. Like we thought like this guy he was done, right? So he started bringing his patients outside, and he's been seeing incredible improvements in their health, and he continues to do this. And he goes around speaking to hospitals and med schools and all this, which is amazing that he's doing this, and he's advocating for this, and he's telling people how important sunlight is for their patients. When we go back to before the Flexner report, are you familiar with the Flexner report? Okay, so the Flexner report was the Flexner report was this report that the man by the name of Flexner, who had never stepped in a hospital before this, Rockefeller basically hired him to go around to hospitals across the United States and create what was then the Flexner report. And basically what the Flexner report showed or said from this guy's point of view was that all these hospitals are practicing quackery. And the reason for this was because hospitals, before the Flexner report, they utilized all the stuff we're talking about today and all the stuff that like most of the stuff that the health and wellness world uses. So they had sunbeds. So every single hospital practically in the United States before the Flexner report, so this is around early 1900s, late 1800s, had sunbeds. So they brought these patients outside to literally lay in the sun. They utilized this a lot for tuberculosis. incredible improvements.
Mhm.
They used it for a bunch of other diseases.
Yeah,
diseases as
someone
well.
won a Nobel Peace
Oh
Prize
yeah.
for
Yeah.
being the first to cure skin lesions or
Yes.
skin tuberculosis with light
Yes.
therapy.
Yes. Exactly. Augustus Rollier was one of the main doctors who sort of pioneered this. And so, they did that. They did all sorts of things, everything you can imagine, like all these health things. And so, Rockefeller, and you can turn this into a bunch of conspiracy theories, but I'll just tell you what actually happened. Like
Sure,
the history of
sure.
it was Rockefeller, started realizing that from crude oil, he started purchasing all this oil, and he realized that from this oil you can produce pharmaceuticals and these drugs that we can treat patients with and all this, and he can make a ton of money off of it. But that wasn't what was being used in hospitals at the time, right?
Mhm.
So Flexner made this report saying how all these hospitals are practicing quackery and it's all completely a joke and everything. And then through that, he funded hospitals to start basically using pharmaceuticals, and pharmaceuticals then took over, and sunbeds got completely taken out of hospitals, and all these natural approaches to actually healing these patients got completely taken out of the hospital. And so going back to Roger Schwelt, bringing these patients outside, this is not new. None of this is new, right?
Mhm.
Hospitals literally brought patients outdoors every single day. That was the treatment,
Mhm.
right? And not to discount antibiotics or any of these things. Although I'll say personally, I've never taken an antibiotic in my entire life.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and again, grateful for my mom and the knowledge that she found and how she raised us. But I think antibiotics can have their place in medicine.
Mhm.
So Roger Schwelt is bringing these patients outside, and he's seeing these outcomes. And again, none of this is new. So that's the vitamin D story. A lot of people think UV light, vitamin D, that's it. UV light also produces, well, a bunch of different things, but two other main things that we have extensive research on. One is nitric oxide. So our
Mhm.
skin, I think I mentioned this when we were talking about blue light on mitochondria, but your skin has the epidermis, which is a set of skin cells, and then below the epidermis is the dermis. In the epidermis, which is right above the dermis, it's the top layer of the cells. Right below a bunch of dead skin. We have dead skin on our cells here. Right in our epidermis, we have basically nitric oxide stores. There's nitrate, nitrite, all these other forms of nitric oxide that is being stored in our epidermis. When you shine UVA light, so UVB is what produces vitamin D. When you shine UVA light on the skin, these nitric oxide stores actually basically like the UVA mobilizes these stores, allows them to leave the epidermis and go into the bloodstream. Now, nitric oxide has a ton of health benefits. One of the main ones is it vasodilates our blood vessels. So
Mhm.
basically making our blood vessels get bigger, allowing more blood flow to come through. And here we're seeing a ton of cardiovascular benefits.
Mhm.
So
Which is one of the leading
causes
of
yes.
mortality.
Yeah. So cancer and cardiovascular disease is top two leading causes of mortality. And then number 3 is medical incidents and unexplained
Isn't that crazy?
stuff. Yeah, it's crazy. But that's another rabbit hole. Unless you wanted to say something.
No, go
okay.
ahead. Keep going.
So yes, number 1 and number 2, cancer and cardiovascular. So Dr. Richard Weller, he is a dermatologist who says he has no more dermatologist friends anymore because of the research and the
'cause
advocacy.
they hate, right? Like they hate sun exposure.
They hate
right?
sun exposure.
Okay.
Yeah. And so Richard Weller, he's a dermatologist, a medical doctor, and a researcher. So he's a researcher who's also a dermatologist. And his team actually discovered that UVA light can mobilize these nitric oxide stores, get this nitric oxide into the bloodstream, producing, and they've actually shown reductions in blood pressure. We know that it vasodilates the blood vessels, which then brings about lower blood pressure,
Mhm.
and then a ton of other cardiovascular benefits downstream of that, right? So there's great research, like the American Heart Association has published stuff on this. This is very mainstream. It's just not talked about a ton. Frankly, I actually do not know, because it's like these papers are literally published by the American Heart Association in some journals that they have. So very mainstream, but UVA light increases nitric oxide in the body as well. And outside of cardiovascular benefits, there's other benefits as well. Then there's also POMC, so pro-opiomelanocortin. So pro-opiomelanocortin is this molecule that gets cleaved into other hormones. So there's beta endorphins. There are naturally producing opioids that our body produces from pro-opiomelanocortin that basically create like an addiction, right? They're naturally producing opioids. The way this gets produced, there's multiple ways. One of the big ways that this gets produced is from UV light exposure. So UV light exposure onto the skin produces pro-opiomelanocortin, POMC. That gets cleaved into a bunch of different hormones, one of them being beta endorphin. There is melanocyte stimulating hormone. So it is a hormone that produces melanin in melanocytes. Melanin is what gives us the pigment on our skin, and a bunch of other stuff. A lot of implications to mental health. A lot of implications to in the mental health aspect of it is that opioid that you're getting. You're getting a feel good hormone, right? And so there's that aspect of it too that isn't talked about a lot. POMC, and this hormone also just controls so many different pathways in our body. Again, it gets cleaved into a bunch of different things that we talk about forever, and there's so many aspects of there. But that's just to wrap up that it's not just vitamin D with the UV light, right? You're also getting nitric oxide, you're also getting POMC, and I'm sure other stuff from there that we don't even know yet.
Sure.
Right.
Sure.
And like the nitric oxide thing, that paper got published in like 2011, I think. So this is new for us.
Yeah.
So there's so much more to even that we don't even know. But yeah, I wanted to highlight that this is another aspect of sunlight, UV light specifically on the skin.
Well, so this is another reason why I'm doing this podcast, is because I heard a statistic once that said that it takes roughly 20 years for scientific research to make its way downstream to what doctors practice.
Yeah, sometimes more than 20 years
or more. Yeah. And then I thought, when I thought about that, me as an architect, I'm like, how many more years does it take for it to get downstream from what doctors are practicing down to where it becomes common knowledge enough to where we are actually building a built environment around that element, right? And so I thought to myself, I was like, well, let me not just wait, because we've had so many scientific advancements, and a lot of these studies are old, but they still haven't made their way down to the architectural form yet, or maybe it used to be by accident and now we're moving away from it.
Sure.
But the goal is to try to like cut through all that BS, and just get straight to like, okay, what are the studies? What is happening? Now let's start translating it back into it. But anyway, I want to let you wrap up your thoughts on the skin.
I want to say one more thing. I wouldn't do this part justice if I don't acknowledge the dermatologist viewpoint of UV light, bad, avoid the sun.
Sure.
So the reason why many dermatologists, majority of dermatologists will say to avoid the sun is because they think that the UV light that comes from the sun causes skin cancers and causes melanoma. I'll first just touch on the melanoma piece. Pretty much all of the research that we have shows that chronic sun exposure. So let me first differentiate. There's chronic sun exposure and intermittent sun exposure. Chronic sun exposure, and it sounds like bad, but chronic sun exposure just means regular sun exposure.
Sure. Yep.
So I'm just going to replace the term chronic to regular sun exposure versus intermittent means like, let's say I live like in Canada. I go to like Mexico for the summer and like in the summer and I stay there for like 5 days. I get burned. I come back. Yeah. Like that's intermittent sun exposure.
Yes.
Okay. Intermittent sun exposure from the research that we have again. And I also want to preface from the research that we have, the participants in these studies, whether they be experimental, whether they be observational and epidemiological, it's the average person, which the average person is not healthy.
No.
So,
and like you said, average person is spending 93% of
Exactly.
their time indoors.
Exactly. So I do want to preface with that. But with the research that we have, intermittent sun exposure increases your risk of melanoma and increases melanoma mortality.
Mm-hmm.
So melanoma is the most deadly skin cancer. When we think about skin cancers, like most skin cancers aren't, I don't want to like belittle them, but they aren't that big of a deal, right? Melanoma is a big deal. Like that can be very, that can cause death. It's a deadly skin cancer. The other ones, there's way, you can go to dermatologists, they can take it off and stuff like that. It's not the end of the world, basically. But with melanoma, intermittent sun exposure, more sunburns early childhood is correlated. Correlation doesn't equal causation, is correlated with more melanomas and higher melanoma mortality. Chronic sun exposure, regular sun exposure, there is an inverse correlation. So as you increase regular chronic sun exposure, you decrease melanoma.
Mm-hmm.
Every single paper shows this.
Mm-hmm.
Like this is there are some great dermatologists out there that acknowledge this.
I imagine more and more.
There's more and more.
Yeah.
Even Huberman had a dermatologist. I don't know the name of this dermatologist, but I've interacted with him a little bit on social media, but not enough where I remember his name. But either way, he even has acknowledged that as you increase regular sun exposure, you decrease melanoma. So there's that, right? Now, why do dermatologists think, and we touched on this, but just to reiterate, why do dermatologists think that sun causes cancer? Well, because we have mechanistic studies in a lab with a petri dish of cells showing that if you isolate UV light, you shine the UV light on the cells become cancerous, increase cancer. Why? Because it's breaking the DNA, and mutations in the DNA can arise and cancer can arise. And so with that evidence,
which is not evidence.
Well, it's evidence to the point of isolated UV light causes cancer.
Correct.
No doubt about that.
That doesn't translate
Exactly.
to sunlight.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So from all the evidence I've seen, there's not a single study showing that full spectrum sunlight causes cancer.
Yeah.
There's no study.
Yeah.
Now,
and also the other thing that comes to mind is what wasn't a lot of the places that they were finding the skin cancer on covered areas?
Yep.
Like you would never find it.
So
on
for I believe for melanoma specifically.
Is that what it was?
Yeah,
Okay.
I believe with melanoma, most melanoma is actually on places where either on the bottom of your hand, the bottom of your foot, your butt area, and places that don't get that much sun exposure. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So and that's the whole thing, right? So it's an inverse correlation. So as you increase regular sun exposure, you decrease your risk of melanoma.
Yeah.
So if we're getting more sun exposure from the correlational studies that we have, we are decreasing our chance of melanoma.
Yep.
And so, all right. So I say this, that we don't want to sunburn. So I want to make that clear to people that I don't recommend people getting sunburned. If you do get sunburned, I don't think it's the end of the world, especially if you are healthy, especially if you have low oxidative stress on your body. I think a sunburn here and there is not the end of the world. I don't have science to back that up, because again, we don't have a population of extremely healthy people. My standards of what I would consider healthy people, and seeing if sun exposure or seeing if sunburns is increasing the risk of cancers. Anyways, quickly back to Richard Weller.
Mm-hmm.
So Richard Weller, he has a preprint. So for those unfamiliar, a preprint is basically a paper. So researchers write a paper. They do a study. They write a paper. The publication process in research takes a long time. Mm-hmm. So the paper that Glenn Jeffrey did with the incandescent light bulbs, that first came out as a preprint, I think almost like a year before it actually got published. Mm. So from when they finished writing the paper to when they actually applied for publication to when it actually got published, it was almost a year. So these things take a long time. So what's great about preprints is that these researchers can put it on these servers, and then the general public can read it, and other researchers can read it without it having to go through this huge peer-reviewed process. Which there was there was a researcher who created a whole paper with ChatGPT, copy and paste. It went completely through the peer review process, got published.
Really?
So that's again another whole rabbit hole we can dive into the peer review process, and that that depended on journals.
Sure.
Some journals were more prestigious and all that. Anyways, Richard Weller, brand new preprint that came out this year, 2026, looking at the risk benefit ratio of sun exposure. So we see in observational studies that there is a potential risk of increasing skin cancers, especially if you're burning and things like that. We also see in every single study looking at sun exposure and all-cause mortality. All-cause mortality meaning the risk of mortality from any cause, cardiovascular, cancer, whatever it is. Every single study looking at that shows as you increase sun exposure, you decrease all-cause mortality. There's not a single study showing that increased sun exposure increases all-cause mortality. Not a single one.
Yeah.
So with that in mind, right, some observational studies showing more sun exposure increases risk of skin cancers. All the other studies looking at all-cause mortality, cancer mortality, cardiovascular mortality, increased sun exposure reduces your risk. So Richard Weller and his team set out to look at the risk-benefit ratio, right? What is that ratio? And if the ratio leans more towards the benefit, then we need to change our stance on sun exposure. If the ratio leans more towards the risk of sun exposure, then we need to start saying that we need to acknowledge that, yeah, what dermatologists are saying is right. It's a very fascinating paper. I did a podcast where, we talked about this paper for like 40 minutes where we just dove super deep into it. But I'll give the gist of it. Basically what they found is that for every one skin cancer that you save by reducing sun exposure, so every one life that you save by reducing sun exposure from skin cancer, you basically add 75 deaths from other causes. So if you want to save one life from skin cancer by reducing sun exposure, so if you reduce sun exposure and you can save one life from skin cancer, you produce 75 deaths from cardiovascular, from other cancers, deadly cancers, and things like that.
That could literally be the reason why cardiovascular disease is is up there as high as
it's
not
definitely
the only reason, but
yeah, it's definitely one of the big reasons. And so when this preprint, so it's a preprint, it's not published yet, it's not peer reviewed.
Sure.
When it does get published, and if dermatologists read it, we should start questioning our stance on sun exposure. I mean, I think we could start questioning with the evidence we already have. But this paper is the first paper looking at the actual risk-benefit ratio of a big population. I will also say that this paper is looking at UK residents. So the UK Biobank is an amazing resource for a lot of these scientists. It is upwards close to 500,000 participants in the UK. Basically got a ton of different labs, a ton of different blood works. What's really cool is the people actually stored some of the blood because we know that as technology advances, we'll be able to test different things with the blood. So they actually store it. So as technology advances, they can go test other things with it. There's proteomics. That's really cool that they actually did in this paper. So they actually saw that there's an immune benefit that you're getting from the sun exposure that is actually reducing the cardiovascular death, reducing the cancer death.
It probably is related to vitamin D because vitamin D plays such a crucial
vitamin
role
D.
in the immune
Vitamin D
system.
definitely the nitric oxide as well with the cardiovascular.
It's not a single thing.
Exactly.
You're right.
Yeah.
The moment we start trying to pick it apart and say, what is the one thing, we're already making a mistake.
Exactly. And so this paper is really great. I also want to just point out, right, with this whole correlation thing, I think it's safe to say that everyone can agree that smoking causes lung cancer. I don't know any doctor who disagrees with that, right? Smoking causes lung cancer. We do not have a randomized placebo-controlled trial showing that smoking causes lung cancer. We can't take two groups of people, we can't randomize two groups of people, tell one group go smoke, tell the other group don't smoke, and then look at the health outcomes. We can't do that. That's unethical, right? Because we already think we know that smoking causes lung cancer, so we're not gonna do that study. So instead, what we have is we have correlation studies showing that as you increase smoking, you increase lung cancer, and there's a dose-dependent curve there. So as you increase that dose of smoking, as someone smokes more and more, you get more and more lung cancer. That's a sign of a causation.
Mm-hmm.
We also have mechanistic studies of in vitro cells and animal models. Smoking causes lung cancer. So with that evidence that we have, we don't have a randomized placebo-controlled trial, but with evidence that we do have, which is a lot of correlational evidence, we are going to say that smoking causes lung cancer. The same thing with the sun exposure. It's the same type of evidence that we have, where as you increase sun exposure, you reduce mortality. As you reduce sun exposure, you increase mortality. So yes, it's correlation. We also have all these mechanistic studies, vitamin D, nitric oxide, pro-opium, melanocortin, infrared light going on to the mitochondria. We have all this mechanistic studies, right? Unfortunately, we don't have a mechanistic study of looking at full spectrum sunlight. Although, like, I'm actually gonna put this out there. Maybe there's a researcher looking at this. Well, first off, I will be doing, if I get my grants from Davidson, I'll be doing research in London this summer of some great stuff. The lab, it's a quantum biology lab. They do biophotons, which I definitely want to touch on biophotons, which is the light that our mitochondria and cells produce. They also look at the effects of infrared light and blue light on cell cultures. So again, cultured cells. But so quartz is material that, from my understanding, basically allows all wavelengths of light to come through, including UV, I believe.
Yep, that's true.
Yeah. So my thinking is, if we get a cell culture and we just put quartz on top and we just bring this outside, it's all covered. There's no air getting in, all that. And we're getting the cells with full spectrum light. We should be able to do studies on those cells. The reason why we don't bring things outside of the lab is because the lab is controlled. There's not other, we can isolate variables and experimental variables, so we can actually get an outcome. Whereas if we were to bring, someone outside, let's say we did the Glenn Jeffrey blood glucose thing outside, well, temperature is also an effect there, right? With the Glenn Jeffrey one, we were able to isolate just the wavelength, getting rid of any potential confounding variables, right? So that's the reason. But that's to say, I also do have the opportunity to potentially be doing like my own experiment, which would be cool. And if that happens, then I will try to see if we can get this quartz experiment done.
I want to hear about
I have
this.
no doubt that could work. And if we can get that to happen, the way we do science, and especially in this field of light and sunlight and all this, is going to drastically change. But anyways,
there are companies that make quartz glass.
Okay, yeah.
So we can touch base on that offline.
Yes, for sure.
For your study.
Let's do it. So, quickly wrapping this up here, correlation doesn't equal causation. We have a ton of correlation showing that increased sun exposure reduces mortality. We have all these mechanistic studies. So from my read of the literature, no doubt that humans need more sun exposure.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Like, no doubt about it. Like, it's hard to argue otherwise. It really is. So anyways, that's my tangent. We can get into light exposure on the eyes if you want to touch on that.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I think what I'd like to do is talk about light exposure on the eye and how does light get enter, because right now we're still at the point of trying to figure out how does light enter the body. So we've talked about, I think the last piece is really going to be the eyes. And then after that, I want to talk about timing of lighting. Great. Because I think that, just like you were saying, we're getting into this space in the health space now where people are like, oh, ultraviolet is bad, blue light's bad, red light good. And it's like, no. It's about patterns, right? It's about balance. And so I want to talk a lot about the patterning of the day and what that is. But let's first finish let's start talking about eyes and finish talking about how light enters the body.
Cool. So with the eyes, I'll first start explaining what the circadian clock is. So we have a circadian rhythm. So the earth has a rhythm, day and night cycle. The sun rises, the sun sets, it gets dark. The sun rises, the sun sets, it gets dark. It's a continual 24-hour cycle. Our body has adapted to regulate different processes with this circadian cycle, with this cycle of the light dark cycle. And so we have in our brain what's called the suprachiasmatic nucleus. It's right above the optical chiasm, which is like right here. So it's right supra above the optical chiasm, suprachiasmatic nucleus. And it sits in the hypothalamus of the brain, at the bottom part of the hypothalamus. And it is considered the circadian, like it's a master circadian clock of the body. So it's a central clock. You can think of it like, my analogy of it is like the Big Ben. So you're in London, you have the Big Ben, that is the main clock that it tells the time, so everyone can look up to it and can see the time, and then they know the time, right? We also have peripheral clocks. So pretty much every single organ of the body, the liver, the heart, the pancreas, every organ of the body has its own circadian clock that is partially governed by the suprachiasmatic nucleus, the central clock, but it also receives signals other ways. So our muscles have circadian clocks. They receive signals from the suprachiasmatic nucleus, but they also receive signals when we physically move. So like, this gets into like what time of day is like best time to like move in terms of from a circadian perspective with your muscles. When you exercise at certain parts of the day, it resets the clock and it synchronizes that clock with the time of day you're exercising. So there's peripheral clocks and there's the central suprachiasmatic nucleus, central circadian clock. Now, this circadian clock governs every single cell, every single organ of our body. Every single cell has a circadian clock. And with that, basically what that means is that there are fluctuations in, let's say, hormones that get released by a cell or by an organ. There are fluctuations in all the different processes that these cells are doing. And they are rhythmic in pattern. So they go with this 24-hour cycle. And throughout the day, they may rise and fall and rise and fall, or, they may just rise once and fall, So it depends the clock, and this gets into so many, there's so many different directions you can get into here. But the main Zeitgeber, which is timekeeper, the main timekeeper of this clock, the central clock, because the central clock needs to keep time, right? It needs to know what time of day it actually is, so it can send the right signal to all the organs and to all the cells to tell it what time of day it is. And so if the circadian clock is getting the wrong signal, then it's going to send the wrong signal to the cells. Does that make sense? So the main timekeeper is light. So there's other timekeepers. There is food intake is a timekeeper. So eating at the right times, exercise is a timekeeper. But the main one, without a doubt, is light. So in our retina, we have rods and cones. These are visual. These function visually. And then we have what's called intrinsically photosensitive retinal ganglion cells. So these retinal ganglion cells are non-visual photoreceptors. So they receive light, but they aren't part of the visual system. So they don't actually account for our eyes seeing colors and seeing things and things like that. These cells, these intrinsically photosensitive retinal ganglion cells, have a special pigment in them called melanopsin. And melanopsin is this is an opsin, an OPN, and this opsin has a maximum absorption peak right at 480 nanometers. 480 nanometers is in the blue light spectrum. Remember, going back to blue light, 400 to 500 nanometers, we can split that up right at 450. Below 450 is HEVL, this reactive oxygen species generating blue light. Above 450 is the circadian stimulating blue light. So when I say it's at a peak of 480 nanometers, that peak isn't just straight up, it's a nice curve, right? So there is some leeway in terms of like going a little bit above and a little bit below. But generally we'll just say like 480 nanometers, light comes into the human eye, gets absorbed by these intrinsically photosensitive retinal ganglion cells, specifically melanopsin, the pigment. It activates the cell, sends a signal to our suprachiasmatic nucleus. Then from there, that registration is what sets the clock. Now, there's other ways in terms of light setting the clock as well. So not only is it the blue light that sets the clock, It's the brightness of the light that sets the clock. It's the angle of the light that sets the clock. So light coming from above, which is, so it's really interesting. Light coming from above, so top to down into the retina, is going to set that clock more efficiently, more productively. It's gonna
Well, it's telling it it's daytime.
It's telling us daytime.
Yeah, the sun's
And
up high.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
the reason for that, the sun is above here. At night, when we have fire, the sun's the light. First off, the light barely has any blue light, if any, in it, right? But all light in general will affect this clock some way or another. Red light is going to affect it the least, but you have the combination of red light, which affects it the least, the low angle light coming into the top of the retina, which isn't going to hit those intrinsically photosensitive retinal ganglion cells because those cells are concentrated lower in the retina. And so you have that combination that doesn't disrupt this circadian clock as much.
Do you find that sunset is low enough also?
So sunset is should be right at eye level pretty much, right? And so this is the thing. So it's spectrum, so blue light, specific wavelength of blue light, the angle of the light, the brightness of the light, and then the contrast of the light. So at sunrise, what you see, Huberman actually has a paper on this where he basically just like a narrative paper where he references the actual mechanistic paper that the researchers showed the actual mechanism. But the contrast of the light when we see at sunrise, that yellow, orange, blue contrast, so that orange right at horizon and the blue right above horizon, it's very blue in the morning, right? But it's at the horizon where we see that orange color. The reason for this is because of what's a concept called Rayleigh scattering. So light in the atmosphere basically gets scattered, and during sunrise, with how the angle of the sun with our atmosphere is the longer wavelengths, red, orange, get concentrated.
Because
the
it's
blue,
going through more atmosphere.
Yeah.
So it's scattering more of the higher frequency light, like the blue lights.
Yep, exactly. The blue lights get scattered. That's why the sky looks blue. Yep. The sky looks blue and the horizon is orange.
Got it.
And so that contrast that we see, that orange-blue contrast, also tells our suprachiasmatic nucleus and entrains the suprachiasmatic nucleus. So it is the wavelength, the brightness, the angle, and then the contrast. So, one of Huberman's main protocols is like go outside within the first hour of waking to set that clock. Well, what you're getting there, you're getting the brightness, you're getting the blueness, let's say, for lack of better terms. You're getting the angle, but what you're not getting is the contrast, because if you wake up and if you go outside past sunrise, right, you're not going to get that contrast because the contrast is gone. The sun's already above. Scattering isn't occurring. The Rayleigh scattering isn't occurring. Not to say that's bad. It's just
different.
It's just different.
It's not the same quality of light.
Exactly. So with those four aspects, those are the main four aspects that entrain our circadian clock.
Can I say one thing?
Yeah.
No, it's just an interesting nugget. As you mentioned, the contrast in that study on orange and blue, and the contrast between those lights specifically, or those colors specifically, it makes me think of I've done a little bit of research in like film and whatnot, and one of the go-tos in film is to create a specific color contrast that is very pleasing to the human eye. And would you guess what colors those are? Orange and blue.
Orange, blue. Wow.
Yeah, and so what they'll do is they'll create that in various different ways, but on a single scene, they'll try to get that orange blue contrast in, whether it's very strong or very light. Start looking for that in movies, and you'll start to recognize. You're like, oh, they're doing it. The orange blue contrast. The orange blue contrast. So it's interesting to hear you talk about that, because it's like, well, why are those the colors that people are attracted to, or that are visually stimulating, that attract our eye? And it's like, well, it's ingrained in our biology from nature, which is literally just the sunrise.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And, evolutionary speaking, we would have seen the sunrise every single day. We would have probably woken up from light. So, it gets bright before the sun actually rises. Most people probably don't even know that because they're not outside during that time. Yeah. But it gets bright, before the sun rises. We would probably wake up, and then, we would see the sunrise. We wouldn't have huge buildings blocking our view. We would have probably be in a forest, but you can still see. It may not be the perfect. But we also do think that from like Africa, let's say evolutionary theory is like they went to the water and then
Mhm.
from there you would have seen the sunrise and things like that. But nevertheless, we would have definitely seen the sunrise.
Mhm.
In the Garden of Eden, I can't even imagine how beautiful that sunrise
Oh,
probably
yeah.
would have been. So that would have probably been absolutely incredible.
Oh, yeah.
So all those things entrain the circadian clock. Now, let's just, for simplicity's sakes, we'll just talk about cortisol and melatonin.
Mhm.
There's for people to understand, and if you want to dive deeper, it affects everything. So
Mhm.
it's not just cortisol and melatonin, it affects practically every single thing. There's over 100,000 biochemical reactions and pathways that are either directly or indirectly controlled by this circadian clock. So everything in biology is controlled by this. And
Mhm.
this is why it's so important. There's like, how many things in biology is one thing controlled by? Like, not many, you know?
Well, it's the more fundamental you
Yeah.
go,
Yeah,
the
exactly.
more downstream effects you have. And
Exactly.
what is more fundamental than light?
Yeah, exactly.
Which probably makes sense why it's so interconnected.
Exactly. And so let's start with melatonin. So melatonin is produced in the pineal gland. There's a lot of interesting like spiritual stuff with
Mhm.
that, but melatonin is produced in the pineal gland, and it is typically thought of as the hormone of darkness. The reason for that is because once the sun sets, in the absence
Mhm.
of light, our pineal gland produces melatonin.
Mhm.
The reason for this is because melatonin is blocked from being produced when specifically blue light, 480 nanometer blue light, gets absorbed by melanopsin in the intrinsically photosensitive retinal ganglion cells, tells the suprachiasmatic nucleus it's daytime, blocks melatonin production. Because melatonin makes us sleepy, we don't want to be sleepy during the day.
Nope.
So we don't want melatonin during the day. We want melatonin at night. We want high amounts of melatonin at night. Melatonin is also a very strong antioxidant. There's anti-cancer properties of melatonin, and anti-aging properties.
Mhm.
So at night, in the right conditions, in the absence of light, our brain is basically being bathed in melatonin. So it goes into our cerebrospinal fluid and bathes our brain. And I think, that the antioxidant properties of melatonin at night could definitely be a reason why we sleep in general. Like, scientists are still trying to figure out, like, why do we sleep?
Mhm.
Like, why is it that we sleep? We think, there's the lymphatic system, which is a waste clearance system for our brain that washes waste products out, which makes us basically be able to think clear in the morning. There's a ton of other things, but melatonin may be one of those aspects as well. And there's probably not one thing. So that's what happens in the correct environment. So our ancestral past, for thousands and thousands of years, we would have had darkness at night, melatonin being produced, able to sleep properly and deeply. If we had fire, melatonin may be blocked slightly, but not very much. We would still be producing melatonin very easily. Now, let's come to modern environments.
Mhm.
So the sun sets. People then probably go eat dinner. They turn the lights on,
Mhm.
or they go into a restaurant that already has the lights on, or maybe they go to like the mall, or they go into a grocery store, or whatever it is. They're being flooded with actually, I was gonna say bright light, but on a relative basis to the actual sun, it's actually very dim light. So if you look at the lux on an indoor environment, even if it looks very, very bright to you and I, you'll be lucky if you can get to 1,000 lux. Outdoors on a bright sunny day, it's up to 100,000 lux.
Yeah, but but you're more sensitive to it at night.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, for sure. More sensitive to it at night. So on a relative basis, bright light,
Mhm.
blue light,
Yeah.
and
Directionally higher.
and directionally higher.
Yeah.
Right. So you're having this this trifecta
Uh-huh.
of
And no contrast.
and no contrast. Yeah, you're having this trifecta of things that are now completely blocking melatonin production.
Well, because it's signaling to your body it's daytime.
Exactly.
It's the middle of the day.
Yeah. So it's signaling to your body that it's middle of the day. Your body is saying, oh, well, since it's the middle of the day, I don't want to produce melatonin because I want to be alert and active
Yeah.
and perform at my best.
So you should produce cortisol.
So you should produce cortisol. Exactly. And so, we can get to cortisol in a second here.
Sure.
And so now, you have a delayed melatonin onset. So your onset of melatonin production is delayed until all the way up until you actually turn the lights off. And
Mhm.
even then, it's going to be a gradual increase in melatonin. It's not like, all right, boom, now your melatonin's
Mhm.
to the roof.
Yeah, and
It's gonna
people
be
wonder why they're laying in bed restless.
exactly, exactly.
Before bed.
And so you have this gradual increase in melatonin. And then also, there's some evidence showing that you actually don't get to the huge peak that you would want to be if you're not if you're being exposed to this light at night. So you have a you have a late onset and a reduced peak in the spike of melatonin that's being produced and the amount of melatonin that's being produced. So that's melatonin. Let's get to cortisol in a second. I want to touch one more thing about melatonin, and we're going to go a little bit back to this light on skin and infrared. So for years, we have seen melatonin as strictly a hormone of darkness. So nighttime, melatonin is produced. Russell Ryder, who is a professor, researcher, who is one of the pioneers in actually he's actually one of the main researchers that figured out that melatonin is this like sleep molecule. And more recently, within like the past 10 years, scientifically recently, he has discovered, hypothesized, theorized, but there's also evidence to it. We need more evidence, but it seems like this is probably the case, that within every single one of our cells, within every single one of our mitochondria in our cells, there is what's called subcellular or extrapineal, outside of the pineal gland, subcellular below the cell in the mitochondria, melatonin being produced on site in the mitochondria. And we'll just go back to our little mitochondrial physiology right now. I mentioned that there's nitric oxide that's bound to cytochrome C oxidase. When red light or infrared light hits cytochrome C oxidase, absorbed by cytochrome C oxidase, nitric oxide is released. Oxygen now can come in, create water. When nitric oxide is released, that allows, through a bunch of chemical pathways. I have a 30-minute YouTube video just on this, with cyclic AMP and protein kinase A and a bunch of different chemical pathways, you produce melatonin. So within the mitochondria of the cell, you're actually able to produce melatonin. And the question would be, well, why would we want melatonin to be produced in the mitochondria of the cell? One thing, this melatonin isn't going into the bloodstream, presumably, we think. It's not going into the bloodstream, so it's not making us sleepy. But I mentioned that melatonin is a very strong antioxidant. When people think about antioxidants, maybe the first one that comes to mind is like glutathione. A lot of people take glutathione supplements. Glutathione is generally recognized as one of the strongest, if not the strongest, antioxidant. Melatonin is actually stronger than glutathione. So most antioxidants, including glutathione, they have the capacity to scavenge one free radical. So for every one antioxidant, you can scavenge up to one to three free radicals. With melatonin, for every one antioxidant, every one melatonin molecule, you can scavenge up to 10 reactive oxygen species. Oh, wow. So for every one, you can scavenge up to 10 free radicals. So you can see that difference right there off the bat. Melatonin is a strong antioxidant in that capacity. Melatonin also upregulates glutathione production. So when we have melatonin actually has the capacity to increase glutathione production in our body. So our body produces glutathione. You don't necessarily need to take it supplements. I think, I actually do take glutathione here and there, but you don't necessarily need to. Melatonin upregulates glutathione. It upregulates other antioxidants as well. So melatonin is, without a doubt, the strongest antioxidant that we currently know of. Now, why do we need so many antioxidants in the mitochondria? Well, the mitochondria is the site where reactive oxygen species is produced mainly. So mitochondria isn't 100% efficient. It's close to it, but not 100% efficient. So it does produce, with an engine, you have little sparks. It does produce these little sparks, and those sparks are these reactive oxygen species, just by nature of it functioning and running. When it runs, it produces reactive oxygen species. If we want to limit reactive oxygen species, we want to have more antioxidants. Melatonin, since it's produced right on site in the mitochondria, it is able to scavenge that reactive oxygen species super efficiently, super quickly, right away, right? So we have this mechanism to limit reactive oxygen species, to limit oxidative stress in the mitochondria and in all these cells. And that is through the melatonin that's produced subcellularly in the mitochondria. Now, so that is pretty much, that is like pretty well established. Of course, it'd be great to have more research on this, but that is pretty much well established. What is more hypothesized, but very sound, it has a very sound mechanism, is infrared light being able to penetrate through the body and then actually allowing the melatonin to be produced. So we think, and Russell Ryder has said this and he's written papers about this, he hypothesizes that the best way to increase the subcellular subcellular melatonin within the mitochondria is to be exposed to infrared light. So infrared light, again, having that whole mechanism downstream in the mitochondria, cytochrome C oxidase, nitric oxide, melatonin being produced. So I just want to preface that as to say melatonin is not just a sleep molecule. Also, the pineal melatonin that your body produces in the absence of light at night only accounts for 5% of the melatonin that your body actually produces. So 5% of the melatonin that your body produces is pineal melatonin at night when you go to bed in the absence of light. The other 95% of the melatonin that your body produces, we think, is this subcellular melatonin produced in the mitochondria. We have studies showing that it's produced in quantities way larger, again, on the scale, 5% to 95%. So that is just to say that melatonin at night has very large benefits there. But during the day, if we want to have the greatest amount of melatonin stores in our mitochondria and melatonin production in our mitochondria, which comes from infrared light, we want to be outdoors, we want to be exposed to this infrared light. So we're producing this antioxidant 24/7. Now in our built environment, we're not exposed to that infrared light. We have more oxidative stress, we have more inflammation, we have more chronic disease. Why? One of the reasons is probably because our bodies aren't producing that subcellular melatonin on the capacity that it would be if it was outside or if it was exposed to the infrared light. So since it's not producing that antioxidant, that strong antioxidant, the strongest antioxidant our body has, it's not being able to combat these reactive oxygen species and these free radicals that our body is producing all the time. But in our stressful environment with LEDs, with the junk food that we're eating, with the stress that is just on us 24/7, our body's not able to combat all those stressors, all those reactive oxygen species. So
this is wild.
Yeah. So that's another aspect of the infrared light that is super important on the skin and on the entire body. Let's see. I think that covers that. Going back to light on the eye, we cover the melatonin side, cortisol, as you mentioned. So cortisol, similar pathway. Blue light gets absorbed by melanopsin in these intrinsically photosensitive retinal ganglion cells, sends a signal to our suprachiasmatic nucleus, which then sends a signal, still in the hypothalamus of the brain, sends a signal to the paraventricular nucleus, just another part of the brain in the hypothalamus. The paraventricular nucleus has neurons that come down into the pituitary gland. So you have this little pituitary that, I'll just say it because if anyone has studied his stuff or has seen a pituitary gland in a textbook, it basically looks like ball sacks. Sure. And so you have these two little like dangly things down here. You have the anterior pituitary and the posterior pituitary. The anterior pituitary is where we're going to be focusing on here. So these neurons from the paraventricular nucleus go down to the anterior pituitary. There is there's a system there that then sends another signal to anterior pituitary cells at the bottom of the anterior pituitary. They release a hormone. That hormone then gets sent to the adrenal gland. The adrenal gland, which sits right above the kidneys, then produces cortisol. Now there's negative feedback loops. So if you produce too much cortisol, there's going to be negative feedback loops where this will then get shut down. But there is you can produce a ton of cortisol. Now, in the morning, when we go see the sunrise, when we go outside in the morning, melatonin is going to be blocked which is what we want. We don't want melatonin to be produced in the morning or throughout the day. But what happens is we have a huge spike in cortisol. Mm-hmm. So cortisol increases in the morning,
which is a good thing.
which is a good thing.
Yes.
So yeah, so most people think of cortisol as the stress hormone
Yes.
that is this terrible thing that we should avoid. Calling cortisol a stress hormone is not exactly the best way we should call it. So cortisol is a glucocorticoid. So what that means is it's a glucocorticoid hormone. Glucocorticoids are basically, they interact with glucose, and they basically, when, let's say, let me just give you this example to make it easy to understand. Let's say I'm getting like chased by a bear.
Mhm.
You have like adrenaline and those things which will deal with glucose and all that. But let's say I'm getting chased by a bear for a long period of time. Let's say I'm running for like an hour, right? There's gonna be a point where I'm gonna need a lot of glucose for my muscles so my muscles can keep running.
Mhm.
Particularly your mitochondria need the glucose. They need to strip those
Mhm.
electrons from the glucose. So your muscles are gonna take more glucose so you can run more. Now, cortisol allows that process to basically happen.
Okay.
So cortisol, and all glucocorticoids, so not just cortisol, but cortisol is the main glucocorticoid. Cortisol, a glucocorticoid, deals with glucose to go into your muscles. Now, that's when we're very stressed, right? So when we're in a stressful scenario, when we're running from a bear for an hour, right? That's a very stressful scenario. We need more glucose. We need cortisol to help transport that glucose into our muscles.
I don't think, just for the record, I don't think you could run from a bear. Like, not you, but just like anyone. I don't think anyone could run from a bear for an hour. I'm pretty sure it would catch us within a few seconds.
That's true. That's true.
But for the example,
So that's what cortisol is meant for. We're in these stressful scenarios. We need,
yes, yeah.
Theoretically, we need more glucose.
It's a kind of stimulant, I guess, in a way.
Yeah. Theoretically, we need more glucose because evolutionarily speaking, in stressful scenarios, we would need more glucose, whatever the stressful scenario may be. Running from a bear for an hour. We would need more glucose. So cortisol increases, more glucose is able to be transported to our muscles. Now, when we're indoors, sitting, sedentary lifestyles, under blue light, cortisol is going to spike, but we don't need that glucose to go to our muscles, right?
No,
we don't need it, but it's occurring because of that mechanism there. So in the morning, we have a spike in glucose. That's good. Now we can increase that spike from more morning sun exposure, from more bright light. Great thing, I think exercising in the morning is pretty good to utilize that cortisol, right? So you have this huge spike in cortisol. Well, you want to actually utilize that cortisol.
Yeah, even better if you can exercise outdoors.
Exactly. So exactly. There's a study published in 2023, I think. And by the way, I can send you all these studies so people in the show notes can look at these. But there's
We're gonna have long show notes.
Oh yeah. I have they're all in my head. I just need to look them up and send them to you. But there was a recent study somewhere in 2020s looking at the effects of working out outside versus working out indoors. They had basketball players play basketball outdoors versus basketball indoors, improve cognition from working out, playing basketball outdoors than indoors. Still playing, there's a cognitive benefit from playing basketball in general, but now we see this improved cognition just from working out outdoors.
Yeah.
Pretty cool. But yeah, so you want to utilize that glucose. So I think, working out, moving those muscles, and, by working out, my perspective is you don't necessarily need to lift heavy weights and stuff. I think that's great. I think weight training is a great modality and something to do. But, go for a hike in the morning, or go for even like a walk, put a ruck plate on, get a little weighted vest. Like that's an even better thing to do. So anyways, cortisol in the morning, you have that spike. Then throughout the day, cortisol is gradually decreasing until nighttime when you have practically zero cortisol. Melatonin is going to rise. Cortisol is going to be low throughout the night, and you're going to go to bed. Our modern environment, we're being exposed again. The blueness of light from light sources, the direction of light, and the brightness of light at night spikes cortisol, making us more alert, more focused. The reason one of the reasons, and this is like, documented, like this is one of the reasons why work environments have blue enriched lighting is because we know it improves performance because you're more activated, you're more, I think probably at the end of the day, it probably decreases the performance because it's too stressful. But for a certain period, it does, you're more alert, you're more focused. So you can theoretically improve performance that way. The workers get more done. Again, theoretically.
The problem is using that spectrum outside of its assigned time period within the day.
Exactly. And so, at night when we're exposed to this blue light, you're going to be more alert. You're going to have a rise in cortisol. You're going to have a not a rise in melatonin. Melatonin is going to be reduced. And then we have all these downstream effects of this, right? So this is where we come to circadian misalignment. So the circadian system is now misaligned. At night, in the modern environment, your brain is telling the rest of your body it's daytime. During the day, when we don't get exposed to morning sun exposure, your brain is telling your body it hasn't actually. I don't know if it's like it's kind of confused. It's like has the sun risen? Like is it daytime? Like what is happening?
Because we're talking about a 10 to a 100x difference in brightness between being outside versus being under indoor lighting.
Exactly.
So like it's not a strong enough, because that was something that Andrew Huberman talks about a lot about, which is that it requires a substantial amount of brightness to stimulate the receptors, I guess. I don't know which ones, but to stimulate the receptors in the eyes to signal to the body, hey, it's time to wake up, it's daytime. But it takes a very small amount of light in the evening time to stimulate that, hey, it's still daytime.
Yeah.
It hasn't been night yet.
I'm gonna agree with Andrew on this one, but I will just say, for a little counter argument, there is one paper showing that you can set the circadian clock with typical dim relatively indoor lighting.
Okay.
Which is interesting. I don't know what to make about it. But yes, you want bright light in the morning.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to put that out there. Just, it's interesting. So so you have the circadian misalignment. Your body's all out of whack. Hormones are out of whack. Metabolism is out of whack.
Which is one of the fundamental issues with chronic, with all-cause mortality. Metabolic dysfunction is at the root of a lot of those.
Yes. Yeah. Metabolic dysfunction, mitochondrial function is at the root of all of it. And so now what we see, we can look at this from a laboratory experiment where we can simulate shift work. So we have all these correlational studies looking at shift work, increases your risk of breast cancer, increases your risk of immune dysregulation, increases your risk of cardiovascular mortality, increases your risk of practically every single chronic disease. Shift work. Now, I love my shift workers. We need them. So, I don't know. We need to figure things out. And there are ways to mitigate the effects of shift work. So there's an interesting study looking at fasting. So just don't eat at night during your shift, And
then I guess you have to eat while you're sleeping during the day. Is that?
Yeah, I don't know. It's interesting. So, but there's ways to, and I don't know. I don't have the best answers for them, but in our society, we do need shift workers. So it's something to consider that there are no negative health effects. Shift work has been identified as a probable human carcinogen by the authorities who say this stuff. So yeah, it's a problem. But so we have these correlational studies in shift workers. We have correlational studies just with artificial light exposure and cancer and all-cause mortality and cardiovascular mortality and all these other chronic diseases, and showing again, you increase artificial light at night, you increase the risk of these chronic diseases. Again, correlation. We also have these, laboratory experiments where we're simulating shift work and we're seeing markers of, let's say, reduced cardiovascular health, whether that be blood pressure, whether it be, lipoproteins or cholesterol, whatever it may be, right? We're seeing these markers of reduced cardiovascular health and chronic health and things like that. So, and we have all the mechanism behind it. We have it's the research is extensive with the mechanisms and all that. So It is probably I think, one of the biggest problems that people are being exposed to the wrong light at the wrong time and
Mhm.
not being exposed to the correct light at the right times,
Mhm.
right? They're not getting sun exposure and they're getting light at night. Now, actually, I think that sums it up. Yeah.
Yeah, so I want to constantly, as you're saying things, I want to constantly tie it back to architectural design
Yes.
in pieces, rather than doing like a whole segment of just this.
Sure.
So another piece to the puzzle that I've started experimenting with is lighting design in the house,
Mm.
but from a healthy lighting perspective. And once again, I'm not talking about biohacking where I'm just going to grab a specific light bulb, right, and put it in. But instead, it's like one of the things that I do, that I'm starting to experiment with is really not having any artificial lighting in the ceiling. Because if you think about it, ultimately the best lighting for a house is going to be natural lighting,
Hmm.
right? And so what I do is programmatically I'll design a space so that way you wake up. I would almost always, I don't know, there's only been one design that I've done where I didn't do this, but we came up with other ways to get morning sunlight into the bedroom. Morning bedroom should be on the east of
Oh
the
yeah.
house.
Oh yeah.
Okay. And they should have a long field of view extending beyond the east. You shouldn't push. I won't go into all the details, but like here's some examples. Like I would never push my building up against an eastern forest. I would
Mm.
I would push up against a western forest, right, or tree line,
Sure.
and then have the eastern field or
Yeah.
eastern body of water to double that
Yeah.
reflectivity, right, to get back into the building. And then I would put the any morning spaces programmatically, which would be like the bedroom, put on the east. Coming back to the quartz element, like that, I think you're going to want vitamin D production, especially in the morning. You're going to want those higher UV spectrum. So I think quartz
That'd be
glass.
that'd be more in the middle of the day.
Oh, really?
So UVB, the UVB window is typically, it depends. Well, one, it depends where you are, latitude. Um, Typically around, let's say, 11 a.m. to 3
Okay.
p.m. Typically.
So you don't
Depends
think so? So you're saying that likely UV light is probably not essential at like first thing in the morning.
Okay, wait, sorry. So UVB, UVA comes out within like an hour after sunrise.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I would probably still do it in the bedroom
Yes,
because
for sure.
maybe there are people who are still in the bedroom within an hour after sunrise.
Mhm.
Although the way I'm designing houses, you'd have to block those windows off pretty tight to keep the light from coming in. But the goal is to have you wake up not from an alarm, but from light,
Yep.
and then wake up
Best
with the
way.
right kind of light. And
Mhm.
so we'd get the windows angled right, the overhangs angled just right, so that way you're getting that sunrise coming right in, it's hitting your bed. And then as the sun is moving across the sky, programmatically, I design the home so that way, as you're moving throughout the home programmatically, the sun is following you throughout that home, and so you're getting that sunlight, which is going to be naturally lighting the spaces.
Mhm.
There's other benefits for that as well, but we're just talking about lighting for this conversation. And um, so one thing that comes to mind is that I'm if I'm addressing lighting and program from that perspective, then I don't really need artificial lights during the daytime while the sun is out because I'm bringing in the best source of light from a health perspective, which
Mhm.
is sunlight.
Mhm.
I need to be careful to not think that that is the only form of light we need because it's still being filtered through glass unless we're using something like a quartz glass that's bringing in the UV. Um, but but if that's the case, then artificial light would only be utilized after sunset. Now, artificial lighting in the home, if first of all, no LEDs for obvious
Yeah.
reasons. We could talk about the flicker, we could talk about the color spectrum, we could talk about the fact that it doesn't adjust depending on the time of day. We could talk about EMF, we could talk about all sorts of things. But
Can
really,
I say one? Can I interrupt you real quick? Because I just want to point out there is technology
Mhm.
on its way. So Raw Optics,
Mhm.
the glasses company that I'm wearing, they are coming out with a light bulb, I think this month.
Mhm.
It is an LED
Mhm.
light bulb. No, it's not the sunlight spectrum, but it has practically zero flicker, very low EMF, uh, large amounts of near infrared.
Mhm.
Doesn't have far infrared, so it's not going to be hot like a incandescent light bulb is.
Sure.
But a lot of the near infrared, and then low amounts of those short wavelength light.
Mhm.
So it's not to say that all
I agree.
LEDs are bad. So
Yeah, I
I
agree.
just want make that clear.
Yeah, and if we were to dive into it, then I would make a caveat that says if you were to get full
Yeah.
broad spectrum
Yeah.
circadian
Yeah.
light bulbs or circadian LEDs
With infrared.
with infrared,
Yes.
then yes, this starts to blur
Yeah.
it starts to blur and yes, it starts to blur the boundaries of like good, bad, LED bad. Like, yes,
Yeah.
I agree. Generally speaking, those bulbs are either they don't exist or they're very expensive. And most people, it's like, I might as well just get an incandescent bulb,
Sure.
unless you have specific energy code requirements that you have to meet, at which point I would say maybe it'd be better to go with a circadian LED and then to get something that's tuning the color temperature. Ideally, you're getting something that's tuning the color temperature if you don't have natural sunlight coming in, because there's something wrong with the architectural design that it's just blocking sunlight from your space interior. Then I would say you'd probably want to go an additional step of tuning the wavelengths of light so that way it's matching as best it can the colors in the morning versus the colors in the evening. But I don't know. I mean, there's no studies on if that is going to. It's just like trying. It's like maybe this will work. But the point that I was getting back to the point that I was trying to make was I don't put, like, right here we have lights in the ceiling. They're very blue actually now that I look at it. I don't think I'd put artificial lights in the ceiling at all, because the only time that I would need to turn them on is after the sun sets.
Yeah.
And after the sun sets, we shouldn't be getting light from above. So I think the direction I was going with this was probably the highest up I would have it would be wall sconces. And those would be specific, or we'd have pendant lights that are specifically task lighting spaces like a table, but that would be dropped down lower. And you wouldn't be getting the light as much from above. You could also get certain kinds of lights that really focus that lighting down on surfaces. The other thing that comes to mind is I think you could totally use like toe kick lighting, like around the baseboard.
Yes. Yep.
That's lower. And the cool thing about LEDs that you could do is that you could make them red, right?
Yeah,
And you can't. I mean, you could get like an amber glass incandescent bulb, kind of like this one. This is more orange. With LEDs, I would consider strip LED lighting in the the toe kick baseboard area, and I would make it red.
Yeah.
And that's going to be low. It's going to be a dim light. It's going to be diffused because it's going to be reflecting off the floor. It's going to be and though you're maybe not getting the infrared from that, I would say you've probably gotten enough infrared in the house that I'm talking about because you've been exposed to it all day. So that was something, that came to mind.
Yeah. One other point about, you said you may not be getting the infrared. I don't think there's any science to back this up, but I think what's really interesting, you can get an LED light bulb that just emits infrared, or an LED that just emits infrared, that, is invisible. And like, I think it would make sense to me that having that on all night, even when you're sleeping in the bedroom, could be very beneficial.
Yeah, that's not producing visible light.
Yeah,
but
and you'd also want to make sure it's not high intensity. If you measure, you could get a handheld spectrometer at night, measure the moonlight, and see I don't know exactly what intensity that near infrared is coming through at, but we'd want to mimic the same intensity that we would be getting from moonlight. But I think that could be beneficial. How beneficial? Don't know. There's no studies that I'm aware of, but I think it's another thing to consider.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think ultimately it has to be a combination. Primary. So I would think of lights in 3 steps.
Okay.
Primary, secondary, and then kind of like what you're talking about, this tertiary effect of well, maybe that's even a fourth layer, honestly. But like the primary lighting source would have to be the sun. And in my mind, if you lost power to your house, your home should still be functioning. And so the sun should be the primary lighting source.
Yeah.
To where during the day, I don't ever have to turn on the light. Secondary light source could be the incandescents that are task lighting specific surfaces and areas so that way you can see at night. But It's not going to be incredibly bright. It's going to be the right temperature. It's emitting infrared, etc. And then the third might be like the LED elements, which are more accents. That's where a baseboard potentially, elements like that, where you're getting more lighting on the flooring. Like that's kind of casting light on the floor, so you can at least see where you're going. It's a red light, so it's not so it's the right kind of wavelength. And though it's an LED, it's like, well, it's very minimally. It's being used very minimally. Not as like a primary light source is what we could currently have. And then, of course, the fourth layer, kind of what you're talking about, which is maybe you start to consider infrared at night. I almost wonder if you need that if you're grounded at night. Part of me wonders, like the electrical, like negative, connected to the negative charge of the Earth. I wonder if you're getting similar kind of benefits that infrared might be.
You're definitely
benefiting.
Yeah, you definitely are.
Yeah.
But I think if we're trying to like optimize, right?
Or
we'd probably
most
want both.
closely match.
Most closely match. Yeah, that's better. Yeah, exactly.
Okay, let's see. What else? What else do we have to talk about? I'm reading my notes real quick.
Yeah, you're good. While you're reading that, I want to get. So I brought a
Yeah.
I brought a cool device.
Excuse me.
This fine that I'm getting off.
Yeah, of course, it's fine. No. Yeah, so show me. What is it?
So this is called the Daylight tablet. I'm not affiliated. I mean, I have an affiliation link, but I don't really promote it that much. But I seriously just think it's such an awesome device. So Daylight tablet. It is a Kindle. And I don't know if you know like their company Remarkable.
Yes.
Okay, so like it's basically Remarkable, but
could you show it to the camera?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Let's see. Can they see that there? Cool. So so this is the Daylight tablet. You can basically, here's my biostats notes, but it's very very smooth and like, no lag, right? No blue light, no flicker. There's no light shining off of this, right? It's just the light that's bouncing off. You can watch YouTube on it. So
Really? So it's like the old Game Boys.
Yeah. So like here's YouTube. I actually don't know what a Game Boy.
Sorry, I'm showing my age a little bit. They weren't backlit, so like when the sun set, you just couldn't play it.
Yeah,
like you just have to stop playing.
Okay, yeah. So yeah, basically the same thing, right? So and what's great about this, like you can watch YouTube, so it's like 30 frames per second or whatever.
Sure.
I don't know all that stuff, but along the lines of that, you can get internet on here, all the stuff. What's nice about this is there actually is a backlight on here. You can't see it because of the light, but when it's like dark at night, it's amber, so there's no blue light that comes from it. It's very nice, soft on the eyes. But the reason I mention this is that, like, I've heard a bunch of people say how they give this to their kids, and their kids aren't addicted to whatever game they're playing because it's not addicting because you don't have with the games that kids are playing. One aspect of it is the actual game is addicting. Another aspect of it is the actual light that they're getting into their eyes is also addicting. And so with this, you're not getting that. It's much more soothing on your eyes. The flicker, I've realized, is like, not that we can see it, but there is a serious effect because when I use this, zero eye strain, like at all.
Really?
What's also great about this, it's called Daylight because it's meant to be used outdoors in the sun. Because when it's actually best to use outdoors in the sun because you can see better because it's it's brighter out in the sun. You have that reflection. There's no glare, none of that. So I just want to share this because I think it's like an awesome device.
I'm glad you did because I'm interested in trying to find some kind of alternative. Like that.
And for classrooms especially, like this is going to be like game changer for like schools and classrooms, things like that. So
I love that.
Yeah,
I love that. I'm gonna check it out.
Yeah.
And what was it called again?
It's called Daylight Computer or Daylight Company. Yeah.
Got it. I'm gonna check it out.
Yeah.
I'm gonna check it out. This is great, man. So we talked. I think we kind of ran by how light goes into the eyes. I mean, we talked about it briefly, but then we went straight to like the timing of light throughout the day. Is there anything else you wanted to talk about regarding how light enters in the body through the eyes? Or did we kind of cover it all? Well, not all, right? That's a big, a big statement.
I would just say, like, people can look up OPN1, OPN2, OPN3, OPN4, OPN5. These are opsins. All these opsins are on our eye or in our eyes. They're on our skin. So our skin has OPN5, melanopsin. Melanopsin is the same pigment in the intrinsically photosensitive retinal ganglion cells that talk to our suprachiasmatic nucleus that sets our circadian clock. Melanopsin is also in our skin. Why is it in our skin? What does it do in our skin? The science is still trying to figure all that out. But yeah, I mean, our skin has a circadian clock. It probably more than likely has some aspect to do with that. It probably sets our circadian clock. So this is one of the reasons why at night, if you have to be exposed to artificial light, especially blue light, blue enriched LED fluorescent light bulbs at night overhead, you also want to cover your skin. So, I have these ones for during the day, but there's like red blue light blocking glasses at night. And again, like ideally, like these don't exist. Ideally, the red ones don't exist.
Yeah, ideally you're just not getting exposed to the wrong kind of light and you don't have to augment it at the level of your eyes, which is really still not doing anything for the mitochondria. It's not doing anything for your skin. It's just filtering the light coming into your eyes.
And then, affecting the circadian system. I wear the red ones at night when I have to be exposed to artificial light, the blue enriched artificial light. But I also try to cover my skin as much as possible because that's another factor where you have the melanopsin that's going to be absorbing the blue light. That who knows what it does, but all I know is that it's not natural. It's not what my body. It's not the signal that my body's supposed to be getting during that time. So I don't want it. Basically.
We sleep with blackout curtains.
Yep.
Because we don't. Unfortunately, at this point in time, we used to, but not right now. We don't live out on some land.
Okay.
And so there's a lot of artificial light that's just always on. And blinds don't block light coming in. It's more just like a visual privacy thing. And so at nighttime, there's always light in the space unless we have blackout curtains.
Yep.
The problem that I found with blackout curtains is I would like for them to open up just in time for sunrise. So that way they're gone and then the light's pouring in. And so one thing that came to mind is like, oh, you could do shades that if, for example, if you don't live on a lot of land and you don't get like really pure dark and you have control of basically all the artificial light in the environment, then having some sort of roller shade on a timer that is has like a blackout shade component to it that you could roll down and it could black out the window and then it's timed to roll up just before sunrise and then you're getting all the natural light in at the right time, but you're still getting perfect darkness at night, which to be honest, I mean, maybe it's okay to have some light because you have the moon.
It's okay to have
light.
some.
Yeah.
But again, the moon,
it's
although it looks bright to some extent, it's only one lux.
Yeah.
So the lamppost or the street light that's shining into your bedroom is way brighter than
and I'm sure it's a different quality of light.
Different quality. You're not getting near infrared.
Yeah, so probably better to block it out.
Yes. I think so.
Yeah. Ideally, the best thing is to just have no artificial lights at night except for the moon and stars.
And stars, yeah. I want to say one other thing just popped in my head. Geek out a little bit more about mitochondria.
Sure.
Just because I think it's like the mitochondria. So, like I've practiced like Qigong growing up. Qi is like this life, it's a life force in your body. I don't know if we fully is it electrons? Is it like voltage that moves in your body? Is it your mitochondria? Like, I don't know. Like what is it? Like, what is it scientific? Like, what is it? That that's always like a question that had been a question of mine. Because the Chinese were right about meridians, and like acupuncture, and we now actually understand that all the meridians that the Chinese medicine stated, we like have Western Western science published papers that actually show, these meridians actually exist. So I'm no doubt that Qi also exists to whatever that actually means. But I say this because the mitochondria are these like amazing complex organelles that mitochondria aren't like stationary, right? So they move around. There's mitochondria fission and fusion, so they fuse together and then they also separate, and they'll like close like that and become two. One mitochondria will become two mitochondria. They'll elongate. They're like these little spaghetti strands that move around in your cells. Mitochondria have these things called cristae, which are these like folds in the inner mitochondrial membrane. Mitochondria have two membranes. They have folds. The cristae two mitochondria will come together closely, not completely touching, but almost touching. Their cristae will align. So these folds that are in the mitochondria will align with the folds in the other mitochondria. We just found this out like pretty recently. Why do they do this? We don't know. Probably because some communication, like they communicate in a way. I think maybe there's some sort of energy transfer. Again, the cristae is where the electron transport chain is. It's where these electrons are getting funneled through. Maybe there's energy transfer between mitochondria. But anyways, it's just the intelligence of these guys, these little guys, is so incredible. I talked about this in the very beginning. They produce light, right?
Yes.
We talked about infrared.
Oh, that's right.
We talked about infrared.
And you're talking, so let's go into that.
So they produce UV light. Inside our cells, we also have proteins, so opsins, that absorb specific wavelengths of light. It can also absorb UV light. Why do we have these UV light absorbers inside our body when the UV light can't penetrate through our body? So if we had a UV light camera inside our body, generally we would think, well, it would see nothing because the UV light can't penetrate through. But we now know that our cells, our mitochondria specifically, produce UV light. This
sounds like something out of Avatar.
Yeah. Oh, it's crazy, right? Now, it's called ultra weak photon emissions because it's ultra weak. It's very, very, very faint light emissions. We can't see it with the human eye. We can't even detect it with the technology that we've had. We now more so. We've had this technology for a little bit, but it's called a photomultiplier. So it's this sort of like camera type thing that multiplies the light that it's receiving, so it can actually detect it. So we can actually like visualize what that light actually is, where it is, and all this. So with the photomultiplier, we can actually detect these light emissions that come from the cell. We can detect the frequency. We can detect the wavelength. We're getting better technology with this to actually figure these things out. That lab in the lab in London that I may be working at this summer, they do a lot of biophoton research. Fritz Popp was the person who first sort of started in the space. He saw that he used an onion. It was an onion experiment where he had the roots of an onion, and there's mitosis, which is the division of cells and how cells produce. And when we're babies, we go through mitosis all the time. So we can grow up and we have multiplication of cells. We don't want cancer cells to reproduce because then that creates tumors, right? But in normal cells, it undergoes mitosis. Plants, same thing, mitosis. He had an onion plant, 2 onion plants, and the roots of them, right? And he had a shield, he had a quartz plate, and then in the other experiment, he had a different shield that would not allow light to penetrate through. And what he saw was that in the quartz plate, the one where the quartz was in between the 2 onions, that the onion on the receiving end, so the onion on the receiving end the roots would actually start undergoing mitosis. Whereas the onion where it had that plate that blocked any light being able to penetrate through, mitosis did not occur. Why? Well, his prediction was that there is some sort of energy, he ended up thinking it was light, that is being emitted from one onion root, going through the quartz to the other onion root, sending some sort of signal to that onion root to then undergo mitosis. So he did more studies after this, and the research was like getting underway. World War II came about. There's a huge surge in biochemistry, not thinking about like light and electricity and all this stuff. Funding, was a problem and all that. The biophoton research sort of came to a close, now it's starting back up in like the 2000s. And so, and more researchers are being fascinated by this and doing some awesome research around this. But all we know right now is that our mitochondria produce light in the UV, visible, and infrared. We think that it is communicating with these light wavelengths. So we think that two mitochondria can communicate with each other with the light that they're emitting. We think that two cells can communicate with each other with the light that they're emitting. We don't know much outside of that. We do know what's interesting. We do know there's a recent paper published that infrared light actually, like infrared light shining on cells, so external infrared light shining on cells actually affects the biophotons of those cells. So theoretically, the light that we are being exposed to, some way or another, we have pretty much no clue why, but it's happening, that the light that we are being exposed to is affecting the biophotons, the light emissions that our cells, our mitochondria are producing. Now, what effect does that have on cellular communication? What effect does that have broadly on human health? We don't know, but my guess is probably a huge effect. Like I said, going back in the beginning of this, if you read Robert O. Becker's book, if you get into the literature around viewing the body as an electrical being, as an energetic being, as this flow of energy that just flows constantly, and looking at mitochondrial research, we know this, that just it's mitochondria, just these funnels of energy movement and flow. Viewing the body like that, if we also know that our cells produce light, another form of energy, and if we also know that the light that we are being exposed to affects the light that our mitochondria are producing, and if we think we know that the light that our mitochondria are producing affects cellular pathways, affects communication, affects all these downstream things, there's definitely an effect there, right? What is that effect? We don't know, but more research is coming, and I think that's what's super exciting about this field. Like anyone, just look up biophotons, and there's so much to look into there. But that's my geeking out about biophotons and mitochondria.
It's pretty amazing because I mean, it sounds like, I mean, we are beings of light, right? Like, I mean, it's been said. It sounds it sounds biblical. You know what I mean? The more I dive into these topics of structured water or lighting, the more I'm getting into these areas, I'm just like, wow. I have to like go back to scripture and read it again. I'm like, oh my goodness, it says it right here. Like, this is so crazy.
I know. Yeah, it is crazy. I don't know, but there's something to it. There's something, I don't know. All I can say is there's something, and I don't know. And it's so cool to not know, because it makes me so curious to figure things out. Mm-hmm. And I think just real quick, I think that's something lacking in science. Yes, science is an exploration of truth, but if you think you already know the truth, but if that truth is wrong, then you're never going to actually find the truth, right? So I think that's a lot in science, is we don't question beliefs that we think are set in stone, right? Gerald Pollack, he started looking into muscle contraction when he first started, and he has a whole different theory how muscle contraction, if you go into a biology classroom, intro level biology classroom, every single biology textbook, it teaches about the sliding filament theory of how muscles contract. And it's these filaments that slide past each other, and ATP is produced, and blah, blah, blah. He has a different theory. And if we're not at least acknowledging in the classroom that this is what we think is correct, there's other theories, but if we don't at least acknowledge that there are other theories and that we may be wrong, then we're never going to actually do real science, and that is explore and try to find the truth. So yeah, I think people need to keep an open mind, and I think that is what science is all about, is like keeping an open mind so we can explore the natural world and so we can figure things out.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Yeah, I think that's probably a good place to close. Yeah, I don't know what else we could say that would be a better ending than that. Man, Jonathan, it's been a real pleasure
Oh, it's been amazing, Zach. Yeah.
Yeah,
This is great.
I'm like, I've learned so much, and I think the audience has probably learned a lot too. And connecting it back, um, connecting it back to water a little bit, seeing how light affects the body. That's been very mind opening. And like I said, it's really helping me to piece this, like draw the edges of this puzzle piece, so I can figure out like how is that going to translate into architecture, and so we can get healthier homes and more sustainable communities. Um, yeah, what we've talked about. I'll just mention one. I'm gonna leave an open ended question here for if you have anything else to share.
Sure.
So I mentioned a few ideas about homes and how I think we could design the built environment to be a little bit more healthy for lighting.
Mhm.
Is there anything that comes to mind for you that, as you've been going into this research, you're like, man, if only this were just a little different, as you've been thinking through that? Does anything come to mind that we didn't already talk about?
Yeah. Well, I did want to mention this one thing when we were talking about glass and windows. We talked about quartz and letting
Yeah.
that lets in full spectrum, and that's the ideal thing. So there's a picture of a truck driver that a lot of dermatologists use to say that sunlight causes extreme wrinkles and skin damage and things like that. Because what you see is that the left side of the face of the truck driver is completely wrinkled, and you can see very large amounts of skin damage and things like that. Whereas the right side of the face is much better and less skin damage. And so they're like, well, the right side of the face is where you get most of the sunlight coming through. Whereas, the left side of the face is where you get most of the sunlight coming through. The right side, not so much. Well, I've never seen a truck driver driving on the highway with their window down, right?
Mhm.
Most of the times they have their window up.
Yeah.
And so the reason for that is because the typical windows block a lot of the infrared. It blocks the
Does
UV.
it block infrared?
So it blocks a lot of infrared.
Okay.
Not all infrared. And also, the side windows versus the windshield blocks different types of light and different amounts of infrared, but it does block some infrared. Doesn't completely get rid of it, but it reduces it.
Sure.
It reduces the amount of infrared. It reduces the amount of red. It, on a relative basis, then, if you're reducing those, you're on a relative basis increasing the amounts of blue and UVA while reducing amounts of UVB. So it also reduces UVB. And so now you have this just disproportionate light spectrum coming through, which is then touching the skin. And that seems to be the problem, not so much the full spectrum, right? So, so I just want, I want to point out that like, I actually don't recommend people to get direct sunlight through a traditional window.
Yeah.
Right.
Traditional soda lime glass.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now the older glass windows that aren't what's it called, like
Low energy.
low energy, yeah,
or low
whatever it's
transmission. It's like reduces heat transmission.
Yeah. So those older windows that don't do that, I think that can be fine. I don't know exactly like the spectrum that it produces when it filters the light, if it filters any light at all. But that's to say, I would discourage people from getting direct sunlight through windows and glass.
Mhm.
So that's the only thing. Quartz is another story.
Mhm.
Windows that allow in. Now, what I am a big proponent of is like people opening their windows,
Yes.
right, and getting that light through.
Yes.
So that's another big thing. And I'm just thinking about this in the terms of like designing a house and stuff. Like don't opt for the low E glass in those modern windows and things like that. And yes, and having the ability to open windows is really, really important as well. So I'll say that. Outside of that, I mean, I think we covered all the stuff. Incandescent light bulbs at night are a great option, not overhead. And yeah, I think that
one thing
covers.
that comes to mind.
Yeah.
The last thing that comes to mind
Mhm.
is color
Mhm.
for therapy, like light color.
Yes,
light and
yes,
color.
yep.
And I've been reading a little bit about that recently. Did you Did you have anything to say about
Yeah.
light and color?
Great. I'm glad you
Different
mentioned
colors
this.
of lights?
So
Besides what we already been talking about with the blue light and the orange light.
So chromotherapy.
Mhm.
Chromotherapy. I'm blanking on the guy who first invented it, but if you just look up, chromotherapy, basically, you can use specific light wavelengths. Although the way that they started using this was because I've seen like sauna companies have chromotherapy in their thing, but it's just LED lights of different colors.
Mhm.
That's not how it was originally used. How it was originally used was it was like a 250 watt incandescent light bulb, and they would put filters in front of it, and the filters would then allow some light through or allow different different filters allow different light through and different colors to come through. And so, for instance, like there is a benefit from using blue chromotherapy. It's different than isolated blue light from LEDs.
Mhm.
So there's a benefit there. There's like, one of the ones that I just know off the top of my head is like violet is very relaxing at night. So again, we typically think of like
Interesting.
use only red lights at night,
Yeah.
but actually,
Violet's even higher.
yeah. So red light at night for some people. So this can be very individualized, but for some people that can be very stimulative, especially like that. So monochromatic red light,
Yeah.
right? Now, an incandescent light bulb like this, or even like a red incandescent light bulb, I would actually, so this versus like a red incandescent light bulb, I would actually opt for one like this, which is amber in color, because it mimics more of what fire looks like,
Sure.
rather than red is it's monochromatic. It's one specific color.
Yeah, which can tend to actually stimulate. That's
Exactly.
why McDonald's are red.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it can stimulate. For some people, it can stimulate. For me, I haven't found that red light at night gets me stimulated or anything, but I know for some people it definitely can.
Mhm.
And I've
So
heard that
maybe not the LEDs in red.
in red.
But
I think
more
amber in an amber,
yeah.
I think that should be safe for like anyone.
Yeah.
I don't think anyone would get,
Which is easier to get.
Yeah. But going back to like the violet, so violet at night, and chromotherapy is also targeted with infrared. It's always with infrared. It is not necessarily, it's not narrow band. So LEDs are those narrow bands. It is a little bit broader in the spectrum, and you only utilize it for like 10 minutes.
Okay.
So like for instance, with violet, you can utilize it for like 10 minutes before you go to bed. And supposedly it's supposed to, calm you down, be more restful and things like that. So there is, spectrochrome. So if anyone wants to look more into this, if you look up spectrochrome, there's a whole, detailed thing of like what every single color does and how to utilize it for health benefits and things like that. In terms of the Western scientific evidence for that, there's not a whole ton as far as I'm aware of. I know we have like green LED lights can mitigate migraines, and there's some really interesting evidence there. But in terms of spectrochrome therapy, there's not a ton of research on, but I know a lot of people advocate for it, and it could be potentially an interesting thing. So I would say if people want to dive more deep into this, I would say look up spectrochrome, and then Dr. Alexander Wunsch, he's an MD, PhD out of Germany. He talks a lot about this. He has some amazing lectures on this as well. So
yeah, this is interesting. So this actually reminds me of a couple things. First is like if you go into a cathedral and you see the stained glass,
that's exactly what it is. It's like a filter that also has, I mean, I don't know if infrared light is coming through that stained glass, probably some, maybe.
I'm not sure.
But yeah.
It also reminds me of a study where they had rabbits and then they put filtered light in to target certain things. And I think with too much exposure though, then you're getting that imbalance again.
Exactly.
And what they found was that the rabbits that were exposed to full spectrum light were fine. They were healthy. The ones that were not exposed to full spectrum light, but they were instead exposed to varying bands of narrow light, they were like losing their fur. Some would lose all their fur. They would become sterile. Others would have digestive problems. They had like toxicity build up in their body. Some of the rabbits would get cataracts as well. And so it's just interesting to see how just light alone, all other things controlled, like had this dramatic effect. And then the last thing that comes to mind, which actually is this is a fascinating topic that I want to dive into more and explore as I move forward in this research.
Mm-hmm.
Is light and mold in the house,
Mm.
because I have this feeling that like if we introduce more UV light in the home, then you're not going to have the same kind of mold problems
Mm-hmm.
that you would have
Yeah.
in the home. Because like, when do you ever see mold growing in full sunlight?
Yeah.
I cannot think. Someone in the comments will price it. Correct me on this. I cannot think of an example where mold is present in full spectrum sunlight.
Yeah.
I imagine part of it has to do with the fact that ultraviolet is getting in,
For sure.
where most buildings, obviously we're seeing that most buildings don't even have infrared.
Yeah.
But they certainly don't have the UV that is penetrating.
And like stagnant air, you don't have like the airflow that you would get from outdoors.
For
Could be a
sure.
possibility as well.
There's the airflow can be, that's another discussion about fresh air intake in the homes and making sure that the lungs are healthy of your home.
Mhm.
But just on the topic of light,
Yeah.
that's something in my mind, because I saw that there was a study done on violet light, and they found that violet light was somehow like antibacterial,
Mhm.
like it killed bacteria
Yeah.
when exposed to that frequency of
Yeah. And
light.
I mean, violet light probably like ultraviolet light is definitely antimicrobial.
Sure.
Yeah.
So I just want to go more into that at some point.
Can I
But,
say one study that came
Yeah.
to mind when you were talking about the what was the pig study, or what was
the rabbits?
The rabbits,
Yeah.
I was briefly mentioned this. They took rats. A lot of the rat studies, these rats like have genetic mutations, and they have and they're like furless, so they have no fur, which also protects you from stuff and
Mhm.
things like that. And like I say that in terms of like the UV light on rat studies, like things like that. But anyways, they took these rats. They shined different wavelengths of light on them. So they shined blue light, red light, green light, and white light on these rats. And they were looking at cancer outcomes of the rats. There's a figure in the study. Again, I could send you the study. There's a figure in the study of actually a picture of the rats, and it was a group of rats per each experiment, or each group, but they had one rat from each group, just showing the actual effects. There was an increased tumor, increased amount of tumors on the rats that got shown the blue light. So isolated blue light on these rats caused cancer. So
And that's exactly the light that we have on all of our phones.
It's
and
exactly the
screens.
light that comes from the phone, the light that comes from overhead LEDs, fluorescents, and things like that. So
Out of all the colors we picked.
yeah, right. So again, to the dermatologists will harp so much on isolated UV light, but blue light, and especially the short wavelength blue light below the 450 nanometers, HEVL, we clearly see here, can also cause cancer.
Mhm.
Not saying that is why we're seeing all these huge cancer risks. It's definitely part of it. But that's another consideration.
Wow. Well, this has been an awesome conversation.
It's been
Thank
great.
you for taking the time and for walking me through a lot of these studies and helping me to understand what's going on in the body with light. I think I have a much more robust understanding now than I did at the beginning
I'm glad.
of this
Yeah.
meeting, and I already am ready to start tinkering with some
Let's go.
designs. So yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you, Zach. Awesome.
Thanks for being here. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comments below. I'm curious to see what you think. And if you want to support the mission and get a behind the scenes look at all the work that we do, you can join our community at patreon.com/Thresh Architects. Thanks for watching.